my YouTube page. Today is not so much a painting tutorial as it is a discussion of my tools and what I utilize. This morning when I woke up, I saw that somebody had left a comment asking about what colors I utilized and what palette, and they asked me to list it. So I responded to that comment with the list, but I also wanted to just make a video. I figure it was at that point where I've done a decent amount of videos where I can kind of now discuss what I'm utilizing in depth. So this is a butcher tray palette that I got from Michael's, I believe. This one, I guess it's some sort of metal ceramic coated. You can get them in plastic and whatnot. I'm not sure the quality of the plastic, but I've utilized this one for at least a year and a half now, and it's been great. I have a second one that I have some gouache in, and that is in one of my drawers, so I'm not gonna search that out. But these things are really easy to clean. I'll just take a wet towel and scrub out that area, and it lifts really easy. We're working with watercolor, so that works really well, and you can kind of push it back to whatever area you're comfortable with and whatever surface you're working with. Now, watercolors do cost money and whatnot, so you may be timid about doing this, but it really does, I think, help me to do this before each painting. Now, I have these paints caked on at this point, and when I first set up one of these palettes, I had went and nicely put it in and all that, and I felt like that was kind of a waste. I know some people will put paint on, utilize it that day, and then clean it completely. So there's different approaches to that alone. But here, I'll put it, and I have generalized spots, and this paint that's here that's caked on is just residual from when I've had utilized the tube. So for instance, when I paint today, I'm going to put on ultramarine right here so I have some fresh paint. But then, as it gets hit with the wet brush, I have some more to pull off after that. Color-wise, my core palette is the alizarin crimson right here. This is the Venetian red, which I've always, and this is something that I really need to sit down and address. I use the Venetian red, but in the Ron Ranson palette, and in more of a standard palette, it'll be the light red. I had mainly purchased that because when I did oils, I used the Venetian red a lot, which is just an opaque earth tone. But I don't think it sits too far from the regular light red, so I wouldn't go out of your way to get that if it's not, something you need, if you have that light red. So then I have the burnt umber, then I have the burnt sienna, raw sienna, and lemon yellow. Lemon yellow has this small corner, mainly because it gets tainted so quickly. At least for me, it just gets tainted. You could see how, if I wipe it back, I can bring back the yellow of it. But the moment I start utilizing it, it just pushes so green for me. Then on the other side, I have my ultramarine, Payne's Gray, and then up here in this corner, I have phthalo blue. The tube had broken, and I poured out the rest of it, and phthalo blue goes a really, really long way, so that's going to last there a long time. I had set it up like this. The Ron Ranson palette are these guys, and the ultramarine and Payne's Gray, where it was kind of taking the ultramarine and mixing it with these guys for my my darks, and then from James Fletcher Watson, who had the Windsor blue, which is, I believe, the original name for the phthalo blue. I take that and mix that with these guys for a green, a dark green. That was my original setup plan. Then I had added lamp black and sap green, which comes into play once in a while. Down here is very seldom used experimental spot, as well as up here. In fact, let me clean this up. Here I had some Buff Titan, which I think is a good color to have on hand. It's a good experimental color, and either you'll utilize it or not. You might be a purist, you might not. It's fine. As you can see, I have the cerulean blue in there, but I need to put that in anyway. Cerulean blue, in terms of the Ron Ranson palette, that comes into play, I believe, in his books on painting skies. He had added that color to the palette. And you don't have to sit and utilize the exact same colors that people, use or recommend. What you want to look at is the light fastness of the paint and the pigment quality of the paint, and see what it's comprised of. And then some paints have a chalky quality, so you might want to stay away from that as well. So look at those things. Here you'll see I'll use the quinacron gold, but I'll clean that back as well. Now, there has been times where I clean this palette completely, and one time I had taken it out front and took the hose and sprayed it with the hose, and that got it clean. Another time, all I did was sit it in the bathtub with some water in it, and came back an hour or so later. I really don't know how long it had taken. I just went and did other things, and it dissolved all the paint, and then I was able to rinse the rest of it off. Up here were a few of the Van Gogh brand newer paints that were pretty interesting, like the Dusk Pink and I think that Dusk Purple and whatnot. And that made for some very cool minimum palettes paintings. So as you can see, you could put on a olive, and if it dries, it's very easy to rub out. Then the contour of the palette itself, it's raised right here. I don't know if there's a way to catch it, but if I put it here, you see it roll to the side. It should roll to the other side, yeah. And that helps the water run along the edges. So that's my palette. There's plenty of other colors that I do have on the side that I'll throw in and experiment with. Here's the Indie Blue, the Indothrone Blue, which I don't think a lot of companies really make that color anymore, but Posey Gaines was using that on his palette, and I like it, so I got it and tried it out. He was using it, I think, to get his intense darks. It popped up as a recommendation for a classic, I guess 1800s watercolor palette on handprint.com. So that was interesting. I'm just doing a little bit of clean that I don't usually do, just because I'm talking. But that's enough about my palette itself. I have the medium Hake brush. This is the Ron Ranson Hake brush. The reason I'm specifying Ron Ranson Hake Pro Art, I must have got it from Cheap Joe's Art Stuff, is that it has a more chiseled tip and more worn in tip, as opposed to here is a Princeton one. I must have gotten it off of Blick.com. It's more fuzzy and it's less sharp, so it's hard to get that chiseled edge. So this is more the traditional Hake. This is the modified where it comes like that. How to modify it, I'm not sure. There's been some discussions on the Ron Ranson Disciple Facebook page, but I don't know if anybody has had any clear results yet. So Hake wise, that's what I use. I use the black velvet script brush, or the rigger. The name rigger for this brush comes from the oil painters using it to actually paint the rigging on the ships when they were doing their paintings. So I mainly sit between those two. Other things that I have on hand is the Magic Eraser, melanin foam. You could buy a pack that'll probably last you a lifetime off of Amazon for about 10 bucks. I have these binder clips. I'll talk about that in a moment. I have all my tubed paints. The brands that I use are Da Vinci, Cotman. I should have a sample of the Van Gogh. And then I have 2 or 3 tubes of Daniel Smith. Those are more for specialty stuff. So I went towards Da Vinci. Okay, these are considered student grade. However, compared to their artistic line, their artist line, it's just maybe a concentration of pigment levels. Other student grade paints may not have the light fastness, or they might have the chalkiness and whatnot. So if you go this route price wise, you're really good. Daniel Smith is in the more definitely expensive artist range, so that's why I only have like 2 or 3 of them. Da Vinci I have for my earth tones. I find that they're cheaper with their earth tones than they are with some of their other colors. So they might have it labeled as they don't have it on this, yes, Series 1. And I believe different paint companies will have Series 1, Series 2, Series 3, where Series 1 is the cheaper pigments. Series 2, it might be more expensive. It goes up the line. So there's different prices within the brand. And that happens across the board with other brands, I believe. Now, I like to sign with either the Micron pen, which I think are really good pens, or the Jelly Roll. These are also fun to play with on top of watercolor paintings themselves, or to sketch something in and paint over that. Let's see what else I have on hand. I have this spray bottle. I had bought a few of them online. This I used to just kind of re-wet the palette. You'll see that at the beginning of painting. I also use it to spray different areas. I had bought this mini mister. I must have gotten this one off of Blick.com as well. This brand and this, I was influenced by Rick. I'm just, every time I mention him, I can't pronounce his last name. Rick S., who has amazing Facebook page, and everybody shares on there, and he has a lot of YouTube tutorials. He's a really, really fantastic painter, and big influence on my start. I have gum arabic to experiment with. You don't need that at all, but with the gum arabic, you can potentially mix it in with your colors or your water to make the colors pop. I haven't really used it in any of my videos, so it's not like thinking that if you're not getting results that I'm getting, it's not because of this. This is, I'll explicitly say if I'm utilizing that. I also have some other mediums that have not made their way yet, really. A granulation medium. Granulation is how ultramarine blue will have a textured effect. Then I have this iridescent medium, which I haven't used yet as well, but I think, you know, that'll be fun. So those two special effect type things, I think if you are maybe doing journaling and whatnot with your watercolor, you would really probably have fun with those type of things. And there's also paints that I believe come with that added into it. Other brushes that I have laying around that I kind of just grab are this one I got from Hobby Lobby. It's a 1/2 inch, which in the Ron Ranson field of things, I believe he had a small flat as well. It's kind of cool for buildings, and on the side if you needed to really put in fence posts. And I have tons of brushes over here. I have my cards that I cut up for scraping, utilizing the pointy edge for a sharp line, round edge to kind of really push the white out, flat edge for tree trunk texture and rocks. Here's an example of a large Ron Ranson hake next to that. That's what I started out with. Here's a small Ron Ranson hake. When I do a 5x7 painting, I would use something like this. But I found my happy ground with this brush. I have a backup of this one, and unfortunately, you know, when that day comes where it's time to retire this one, I'll have backup. But I really have used that a lot. I have some round brushes that make their way into videos for splattering or different experimentation taking place. You'll probably laugh at this, but I have a crab or a claw cracker, where if a tube of paint is hard to open, but probably not the best thing, run a little bit of hot water over the tube and it'll work. Also, when opening tubes, push all the paint to the end, because if you twist, it'll try twisting that metal if you're having a hard time. So you pushed all that paint up there and it has more support and you'll be able to open it. Another great tool is the razor blade. If you're a kid and you're watching this, don't play with the razor blades. You know, take the end for picking out little spots. You can scrape whole textures with it, much like the card itself. But that's a really good tool. And have on hand scraps of paper just in case you need to do a little experiment to compare, see how things sit. For the most part, I think that is just about everything besides paper towels and a clip and a board. And I'll show you that last little thing. Move all this out the way. I was getting ready to set up a painting and I thought, you know what, let me do a video like that. So paper, that's a big discussion in art communities. I think paper is what you make of it once you plan. I think paper should be the higher quality item that you go with, and it's also going to be what you go through the most and the quickest, most likely. Now here I have the Stonehenge Aqua 140-pound cold press, and I buy it by the sheet, and I buy 10 sheets at a time, and I tear it into quarters. In the past, I would cut it down to 8x10s and 5x7s, but lately I've been kind of just painting in this size. I have the clips on this board. I went to Lowe's and got one of these boards and had them cut it. On the back, I glued a nut that is the same that can thread onto my easel, so if I'm out and about I can actually just screw this right on to that, and I utilize these. There's different papers, different textures. I've used the Arches, which is not pronounced Arches, it's like Ach, but in America we pronounce it Arches. There's the Canson brand, which I think is good as well. Cheaper middle range that sits around this price is the Moulin de Roy. I think that's Canson as well. But the rough press had a weird texture on the back. What other brands? There's a lot of different watercolor paper brands. What might help is to order a few and play around, see what you like. I just found that this paper takes the abuse that I can deal with it with scraping and whatnot. It will buckle some and I'll flatten it out as you see in the videos, but that works, you know, well for me. And yeah, I just really enjoy this paper. I do also use the Bockingford tinted paper. It's been quite a while since I utilized that though, and one of the Patreons, one of the people in the comments had asked about tinted paper, so eventually I'm going to do a video about that. And the tinted paper I think does add a very interesting effect. I have one up on my Etsy store right now where I think I put in the comments that it was on tinted paper, and you can maybe notice the difference if you look at my paintings in general. But for the most part, 140 pounds is the way to go for me. I think 300 pounds is where people go if they put a lot of effort and spend a lot of time on a painting, and apparently it's like thick cardboard where there's no warping that takes place whatsoever. I don't know if I mentioned it, but I think you can go down to 90 pounds. I think Lois Davidson does a lot with the 90 pounds, and I think that's a little too light for me, but she gets like really fantastic results with that. So I do recommend though trying to stay within 100% cotton no matter where you go. Ron Ranson and some of the others would utilize, for the life of me I don't know the name of it, I have a pad of it somewhere, where it was kind of a mixture. I think it was like 25-75 or 30-70 of cotton and paper pulp, and a lot of people use that for practice, and because painting you're going to do a lot of painting. Stephen Cronin uses that paper, I believe, and he gets fantastic results. Same thing with Joe Menza. He uses that paper, but just give them a watch and see what paper they use. And I think that's everything. I hope you enjoyed. I hope I didn't ramble. Oh, I have somebody in the comments. I don't know if you still here. Hi, what do you tend to paint? Landscapes, etc. I mainly do landscapes. So, and I do landscapes in the tonalist style or in the style of J.M.W. Turner and Ron Ranson. So that was cool. Whenever I film this film is being live streamed and people comment, and every so often somebody hops into the chat. Another thing that I actually have is this Kindle that I purchased, which I think is very helpful for a picture on the side if I'm painting from a picture. But I can also log into the chat while I'm live streaming, and I would be able to see if people comment, and then I'd be able to actually have a discourse during these videos. So as more people get involved and start watching these videos, we'll be able to incorporate that aspect into my painting, which will be really fun. Also, if you want little accoutrements for your art table, you know, something like this, little brush stands are fun. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm going to get ready to paint, and I'll do a painting video in a few minutes. Bye.